It was hard to tell who thought they were more important, the horse or its rider. The horse, a black destrier with a swath of white down its throat, walked with such a precise and high-stepping gait that it was nearly prancing, though judging from the imperious lift of its head, it would never deign to do something as undignified as prancing. Its rider was a priest in a dun-colored robe beneath a dark blue cloak, which seemed to Andreas to be one layer too many. The man's face was clean-shaven, and his tonsure was so white that he appeared to be crowned with a halo that slipped down across his skull. His eyes were blue, like the northern seas, and they appeared to miss little. They locked onto Andreas as the not-quite-prancing horse came abreast of the itinerant knight, and Andreas, always eager to practice his humility, dipped his head. The horse snorted, shat, much to the dismay of the rider directly following, and continued on. Andreas stared at the steaming pile in the narrow lane and quietly counted the 8 riders following the priest as they carefully avoided the freshly dropped equine offering. Andreas scratched his cheek absently after the party had passed, wishing once again that he hadn't lost his own horse in a wager. It had been a fine animal, though a bit temperamental when the weather turned. It had rained most of last week, and the beast had been feisty enough that he had, in a moment of weakness, offered it up in a wager with a pair of Frankish mercenaries. Andreas suspected the pair had cheated, but as the crowd had become overwhelmingly filled with friends of the Franks, he had thought it prudent to let the matter lie. As luck would have it, the storm departed during the night, and the last few days had been gloriously temperate. The walk along the Rhine had been pleasant and peaceful, unmarred by anything more strenuous than waving at the occasional boat that meandered past. He had never been to Lorsch and had heard stories of its wondrous library. However, his visit had been unceremoniously cut short when he had been informed by the monks at the abbey that the library had been sealed. And then there had been the matter with the Frankish mercenaries. All in all, a peaceful stroll along the river for a few days was probably the best recourse. It would give him time to fully expunge the annoyance still laboring in his breast, at least until he reached Mainz and sought an audience with the archbishop there, specifically to inquire why His Excellency had ordered the closure of the library in Lorsch. Andreas adjusted his pack on his shoulder, and whistling tunelessly through his teeth, he continued on his journey toward Mainz, following in the direction of the regal priest and his entourage. He gave little thought as to where the party was bound until he stumbled across them again not an hour later. The village was not unlike many of the villages that were scattered along the Rhine between Worms and Mainz. Little more than a tiny green surrounded by an inn or two, a trading house, and a few other houses belonging to the local farmers who preferred to be known as owners of land rather than workers of the same. The rest of the residents lived in huts, scattered among the fields that surrounded the village. The inn, a more well-to-do building than the last few Andreas had seen, was on the north side of the green. Its broad porch was being used as a dais by the local magistrate and the regal priest to address the unruly crowd. On the western periphery of the crowd, eager participants were arguing over the distribution of freshly cut wood around a tall pole. Andreas paused at the verge of the crowd as he realized what he was about to stumble into. He was taller than most of the villagers, and though he stood at the back, he was able to readily scan the crowd for the focus of the villagers' ire. Near the front, not far from the magistrate, was a cluster of men, holding someone between them. A woman, he surmised, as the sound of her shrieking voice carried over the general hubbub. It pained him to walk away, but he knew this was not his fight. He knew nothing of the charges being levied against the woman, or the mood of the villagers. By inserting himself in this situation, by revealing who he was, he could cause more strife than the village was already suffering. He did not care for the way the priest carried himself, but his dislike of the recent abuses attributed to some Dominicans in their zealous pursuit of heretics was not a complete condemnation of all priests. He might be a knight initiate of the Ordo Militum Vindicis Intactae, the Holy Knights of the Virgin Defender, but he was one man, far away from home. A company of shield brethren, as they were more regularly known in the Holy Roman Empire and the lands north.